what is spacetime made out of?
Well, spacetime in the theory of general relativity is not made out of anything. It's a primary concept. It's the main dynamical object of the theory. The question about what it is made of is only relevant for a more fundamental theory, some other theory. And we think by thinking about the quantum mechanics of spacetime that it can be at least convenient sometimes to think of it as made of something else. And the something else could be qubits or some other fundamental quantum degrees of freedom that live in the boundaries of this spacetime, that live far away. Yeah, that's a relationship that we've been studying quite a bit in the last maybe 20 years or more. Yeah, so it's a picture where spacetime is emergent from some other degrees of freedom that live on the boundary spacetime. So in that picture, there is this boundary, this region far away that serves as a framework, as some overall space or spacetime, where the degrees of freedom that describe the interior of the spacetime live. So in that description, we are listing that boundary.
You said it could be quantum degrees of freedom.
Yes.
What else could it be?
Well, it could be other things. I mean, in physics, when we say something is made out of something else, right? We think about some more fundamental things. And in different examples, they're made of different things. In general, in all of physics, in most of physics, it's made out of particles, we say. I mean, that's what, let's say, we learn in high school and so on, that matter is made out of particles. In modern physics, we describe things not as made out of particles, but made out of fields, like the electromagnetic field, the electron field, the Higgs field, various fields. And that, we think, is the basic fabric of reality, of nature at short distances. That's the theory we really have experimental confirmation from. So then all those fields live in some space-time. The space-time is given, is some kind of fixed arena where everything happens. But in general relativity, space-time itself moves and changes, and we think that in some sense it's described by some other field, and whereas the fields of matter, we describe them quantum mechanically. The field that makes the metric or the space-time geometry, we describe only classically. We only know how to describe it classically, and if we try to we can describe it quantum mechanically in an approximate way, and that approximate theory can give us some answers, but it cannot give us all answers. Somehow, we know it fails in some cases. The most important place where it fails, it's in the beginning of the universe, and this is the main reason we want to find a better theory, to find out what happened in the beginning of the universe. Another place where it fails is in the interior of black holes, and that's another reason for trying to understand the better theory. So we know of places in the universe where our current understanding of physics breaks, and the idea is to develop at least some theory that can describe such things, and then try to figure out, of course, in some way that theory is the correct theory. We don't know whether the theories we have right now of quantum space-time, more complete theories, whether they are the correct theory or not.
I subscribe to The Economist. Their science and their AI coverage is among the best I've found anywhere. And I say that as someone who reads plenty of it. I'll give you some examples. They just ran an analysis on how attitudes towards science are changing in American politics and what this means for research and funding in scientific institutions moving forward. This sort of high-quality reporting is fantastic. They even covered how dark energy may be weakening over time. Now, if that holds up, it completely changes our understanding of the universe's fate. If you watch this channel, those are exactly the kinds of questions that we explore every week. I subscribe to The Economist because their science and their AI reporting regularly surprises me with how deep it goes. And they're also, of course, known for global affairs, both political and economic reporting. They are top tier, and interestingly and flatteringly, TOE is one of the only podcasts that The Economist partners with. So as a listener, you get an exclusive 35% off. That's not a deal that they have just anywhere. Head to economist.com/TOE to subscribe. That's economist.com/TOE for 35% off. And what would you say is the primary reason for the difficulty of combining GR with quantum theory? So the pop sci is that, oh, one is discrete and one is continuous, or one is linear, one is nonlinear. How do you see the incompatibility between the two?
Um, well, I think the main issue is that in quantum mechanics, there is usually some time, some order between operators, and in order between in the measurements we make. In general relativity and in gravity, space-time can have different geometries, different topologies. We don't know what the order is. Also, another conceptual difficulty is that in quantum mechanics, we have some observer who's outside the system, and in gravity, everything is somehow inside the system. So we cannot have an observer that has no mass, that has no energy, that measures things from outside. Whatever observer exists inside the universe has its own energy, and yes, these are some of the features that make it difficult. I mean, there are some other technical things people often discuss that are special to, let's say, 4 space-time dimensions, which is that there are certain infinities that appear in the calculations. But that I would say it's a more technical issue rather than a more conceptual issues like the ones we mentioned earlier.
Now, what's the difference between a conceptual issue and then a mathematical one?
Well, I would say a mathematical one is one where the issue is not there, let's say, in 2 dimensions, but it's there maybe in 4 dimensions. So from this point of view, it looks like an accident that we live in 4 dimensions. I mean, yeah, we happen to live in 2 dimensions. We would still have a bunch of conceptual issues related to quantum gravity, but we would not have perhaps that technical issue which I just mentioned, or that technical issue will be a little easier. But the other questions are still there. In 2 dimensions, we still have black holes that are confusing. In finite universes, we have the issue of having to include the observer and exactly how we should do that. Yeah, so those are issues that still remain.
Earlier, you mentioned observers. Now, Witten, along with Pennington and some other collaborators, helped fix what happens inside a black hole interior with type 3 to type 2 algebras and some technicalities. Is that observer that's talked about in those papers the same sort of observer that's talked about in, say, the foundations of quantum mechanics?
Yeah, it's related. I mean, their description is perturbative. So starting with a particular background and considering small fluctuations around that background. It's in the context of what we sometimes called semi-classical gravity. So I mentioned previously that quantum gravity makes sense in a certain approximation. And that's the approximation in which they did their discussion. And so it's an extension of of those methods to deal with situations where maybe we have a closed universe, so a spatially compact universe, or a region of the universe where the observer can access only to a portion of the universe, such as the de Sitter space. And let's say it's an improvement relative to what we had before. So that's what it does. It does not answer the questions of what happened in the beginning of the Big Bang, or how the observer actually emerged in the very beginning, and so on. So that it does not do. But this is normal in physics, right? So we do some things, we understand some aspects, and make progress, and there are still important questions.
Was it a surprising result to you?
Yeah, I think it was a beautiful way of improving our understanding of the so-called generalized entropy. So let me say a little bit more what that is. So if you have a black hole, the black hole has an entropy in the leading approximation, which is the area of the horizon in Planck units. This is a very large number for a macroscopic black hole. But this entropy was then supposed to have a quantum correction that comes from Hawking radiation. So Hawking radiation is some radiation that is, pretty, well, it's some thermal radiation that comes out of the black hole. And if you are looking at this radiation and you are looking at it from the point of view of an observer who stays outside the black hole, and you approach the boundary of the horizon, so the boundary of the region that is accessible, then it looks like it's hotter and hotter and hotter. And naively computed, the contribution to the entropy coming from that would be infinite. However, we think that infinite contribution somehow combines with this area contribution, which is very large and gives really something that should be viewed as finite. And what these papers did is they understood how to combine, how to derive an expression for the entropy that would be finite or would describe changes in this entropy in a consistent way without ever having to talk about any infinity or cancellations of infinities. So it's a better way to think about black hole entropy in the semi-classical theory. It answers some questions of black hole entropy. Again, it doesn't answer all the questions, but it answers some important questions. It answers the questions that are related to, let's say, the interaction of a black hole with some amount of matter, an amount of matter which is not big enough to change the mass of the black hole in an appreciable way, but it describes that matter in a completely quantum mechanical way, and the entropy of that matter in a completely quantum mechanical way without any infinities or anything.
Right.
Now, these infinities are some technical issue which this paper solved and made the theory more reasonable.
You said it solves some problems of black holes, some important problems. That means that there are some other important problems that may be left unsolved. So what are the greatest unsolved problems about black holes?
I would say that the greatest problem is understanding better the black hole interiors. And the black hole interior, the space-time curvature becomes infinite. That infinite means that something happens that we don't know how to describe. So if you don't know what this means, we don't know either. We don't know what happens at the so-called singularity. So singularity is just the name for things we don't understand. But so the Einstein equations themselves predict that as you evolve them towards the interior, you hit this singularity. The singularity is not a place sort of inside the black hole, it's a place in the future. You go to the interior of the black hole and you find this singularity in your future, so you can't avoid it. It's a bit like a big crunch singularity, somewhat similar. So a singularity where that whole region of the universe collapses. I mean, one way to think about it is that the universe is generally expanding, right? And so we're all happy when the universe expands. But in some regions where a lot of matter gets concentrated, the universe starts collapsing. And in these regions, you produce a small big crunch. So a region where the space-time curvature becomes infinite, the opposite of a Big Bang. And that is not visible from the outside. It's behind the so-called black hole horizon. So we don't directly get any signal from this region. But if you were someone who's falling into the black hole, you would get into this region and you would collapse together with the rest of the matter making the black hole. Now, so the fact that the space-time curvature becomes very large suggests that in these regions the quantum effects will become important. And so if a full theory should say exactly what happens there and should give us a more complete description. And we don't yet have such a thing. What we do have are some theories that can describe aspects of black holes as seen from the outside. So if you remain outside the black hole and ask what we think are very precise questions about the black hole, then we have we think we know what would happen, at least conceptually. Part of what we were discussing previously about the entropy and the algebras and the work of Pennington is related to describing the black hole from the outside.